Okay, here we are. We are back again. Welcome to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filmerinquiry.com, and TwinCitiesGeek.com. So, back with another stream reviewing the latest movies. Obviously, we got to talk about the big one coming out this weekend. It's May, so summer movie season is starting. So that means Marvel movies. So we're going to talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the third and final film in the Guardians of the Galaxy series. We'll also be talking about a few other films that came out on streaming this week. We'll be talking about Quasi, the new comedy from the the Broken Lizards comedy troupe. You might know them from like Super Troopers and stuff like that. We'll also be talking about the documentary Judy Blume Forever, about the prolific author that is currently on Prime Video. And we will also be talking about Kids vs. Aliens, which is a horror movie on Shudder. So we're covering a little bit of everything here. We're covering films currently in theaters this weekend. We're covering a Hulu film, a Prime film, and a Shudder film. So a little bit of everything. So if you can get out of the theater, there's something to watch. And if you can't, there's tons of other stuff that we'll talk about here. So we'll get around to that. But if you want to check out any of the written reviews on the stuff that I talk about here, you can check out movieswithmark.com or filminquiry.com or twincitiesgeek.com. Although, if I'm being honest, most of the stuff will go on like movieswithmark.com and filminquiry.com. There's other places that I write for, but more sporadically. Like there's a few other websites that I write for that they just want like the geeky like Marvel and Star Wars stuff. That's all they want. So yeah, there's other places I write for. You might see some of my reviews pop up here and there. So there you go. So yeah, usually I get around to doing these reviews earlier, but I've been a little backed up, and it's just gonna get. I mean, April was crazy. The amount of films that came out in April, I haven't even gotten to cover all of them. Tons of stuff. And summer, I imagine, is probably going to be a little bit more crowded, although a few films it seems like are going to back off because like a lot of the bigger ones are going to come out in summer. So. That being said, a lot to look forward to. So I guess we'll jump right into it then. So let's get right into the big film this weekend. Guardians of the Galaxy. Let me pull up my notes here so that I have the entire cast list in front of me. Because it is a massive cast. For as recognizable as these names are and familiar are with these characters, still gotta have notes. Okay. So let's get ready to talk about another sci-fi misfit adventure. Okay, and let's get prepared here in 3, 2, 1. So Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is a trilogy closer for this sci-fi adventure saga of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think it's safe to say that this is one of the more consistent superhero trilogies of this entire cinematic universe. I mean, when you compare it to like the other stuff we've had with, with like the recent wrapping up of Ant-Man, with Iron Man, with Thor, even though Thor is more of a quadrilogy at this point, they've all kind of like fluctuated. But Guardians of the Galaxy has surprisingly remained fairly consistent. Like I wasn't as big on Volume 2 as a lot of people were. Of course, I love the first one because it was a big surprise, because who would think that you would care that much about, a talking raccoon and a talking tree and care about their adventures and be excited with what they were going to do next? But we were. And a lot of that is due to James Gunn. James Gunn having directed all 3 films at this point, and at least co-written all of them. With Volume 3 in particular, he does write and direct it. And I think having Gunn at the helm makes sure that there's like a consistency within this trilogy here that makes you care about the characters, and that makes sure that its heart is always in the right place, so that it never feels like the film is just like it never feels like this third entry for as long as we've been hanging around with the Guardians of the Galaxy between their own films and the Avengers films. It never feels like it never feels like it's trying to like recapture the same thing. It always feels like it's trying to go in another direction and expand it a lot further. And it's surprising that even after the events of of Avengers Infinity War and Endgame, with how much it would have like shaken up like Volume 3, it remains pretty consistent and builds on everything that came before it. While still being, something more. I will say this though. If you've come into this film expecting to see some of the big laughs that you got with like the first film, you might not get as many of those here. What you will get, however, is a lot of heart and a great closure for these characters. Because I guess the best way to talk about Volume 3 is to say that it expands on the areas that kind of felt like neglected in the previous Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Because at this point, with Peter Quill, or Peter Star-Lord Quill, played by Chris Pratt, we know just about everything about him. We get a little bit of his origins within the first film. We learn more about his lineage within like the second film, and his powers and his predicament with like his parents, and his hang-ups about going back to Earth. So we more or less understand Peter at that point. We understand his plight, what he's all about. So this film actually takes its time to explore more of the characters who we don't spend as much time with, and usually felt like supporting characters, especially within Volume 2. That was kind of like my big hang up, is that we kind of forget about some of these characters, and it more or less just feels like they're giving them stuff to do, as opposed to like play like a central role within like the greater story that Peter's going through. And in particular with Volume 3, we expand on Rocket, the raccoon, the talking raccoon voiced by Bradley Cooper, who we honestly haven't gotten a lot of development out of. Like, there's been like bits and pieces of his history that's been scattered throughout the first two films, but we haven't really gotten to know him that much. He's mostly just been like the wisecracking, talking animal who, he's got an attitude. He's got a weird sense of, dark sense of humor. And that's about all we know about him. We do know that he was experimented on, at least. Like, we got bits and pieces of that in the first film. But he's been very like tight-lipped about it. And I love how the third volume actually opens up with just like, Rocket, like, trying to run from his past. Like, like you can definitely tell there's a much darker tone to this one just by the way it starts. Like when we first see Rocket, he's not as chatty. He's not as, he's not his usual self. So we know something is up, and we're going to learn something more about him. And without revealing too much, we more or less get a complete arc for Rocket within this entire film. We learn more about his origins than we do probably about any other member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is so great because like we haven't gotten to see that much of the character's history and got to learn that much about him. So it was fascinating to kind of like spend more time with that character. In addition to that, we also get to spend time with a few other characters who were kind of pushed to the wayside and almost kind of became like one joke characters almost within Volume 2. In particular with Drax the Destroyer, once again played by Dave Bautista. He's usually like, and this was like my big worry for this film, was that he was just going to be the dumb guy, because like within the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, that's more or less what he was. It was just like, it just portrayed him as just like the big dumb guy. And here they I mean, we know enough about him. Like, we know like his pathos about like, losing his wife and child and how that has affected him a little bit. We know about his inability to, connect with other people, which is why there's like a little bit of like autism coding within him. That'd be really interesting to see, like, where Drax actually succeeds, as opposed to just being like a liability within every adventure. Because like even within this film, there are scenes where they set up Drax to be a liability within like their big scheme here to like infiltrate places and connect with other alien races. It feels like Drax would be a hindrance. And the more that we get to center on him, the more that it expands his character and actually makes him more interesting. At the same time, like, we also get to expand more on like kind of like his best friend throughout this, which is Mantis, once again reprised by Pom. I always mispronounce it. Pom Clementif, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, who's just like, she's just adorable. She's much like Drax. She reads everything very literally. She has like the same sense of humor as him. They get along great. But she's also trying to find like her own freedom, because she spent, within like volume 2, they've established that she's been like under the thumb of Ego this whole time. So she hasn't really had much freedom outside of that, and kind of wants to explore more of that. So I love how they expand on her character. And that's like, those are the characters we expand a little bit more on. Like Nebula, we get a little bit more of her coming out of her shell to realize that she's more hero than anti-hero than they thought she was before. There's some great back and forth with her. There's like, she shows like some genuine concern, and she more or less kind of like earns her wings within like this adventure. So that's how much of the characters. And as for like Zoe Saldana, she's kind of a little bit of like an afterthought as Gamora once again, and it's only because it feels like Gamora within this narrative exists more just for like something for Peter to get over, as opposed to someone who actually has like genuine development, because they established like, yes, this is not the same Gamora from this universe. Like, this is one who doesn't want to have anything to do with the Guardians of the Galaxy. She's hooked up with the Ravagers at this point. We got a little bit of in Volume 2, and if you were expecting more of them in Volume 3, you're kind of not going to get that. Like, like, I love how, like, the film, like, pushes, like, hey, by the way, Sylvester Stallone is in this, and he's the leader of the Ravagers, and we only get to see a little bit of the Ravagers, about as much as we saw in the last film, to the point where we're just like, wait, who are these guys? Where are they? Oh, okay, they're gone. Okay. So like, I'm kind of, like, a little bit conflicted, because, like, Gamora exists more or less as a realization that Peter needs to move on, which is kind of treats her a little bit like a prop, which kind of like rubs me the wrong way a little bit. That being said, she does have some decent back and forth with Pratt and Karen Gillan playing Nebula once again, so she has some decent lines. Now, of course, that's all just the characters. But what are they actually doing in this film? Well, they need to save Rocket's life, and in order to do that, they need to infiltrate this kind of secret operation conducted by this new villain called the High Evolutionary, played by Chukwudi Iwuji. And this is probably, I don't think I'm out of line in saying this, I think that the High Evolutionary is probably the best villain that's been in a Guardians of the Galaxy movie. I mean, yes, like, within the first film, like with having, like, that the Warlord in the first film, he has this kind of like little deadpan moments here and there, but he mostly kind of feels like your, stereotypical, I am here and the mighty, God of the universe type thing. Which is, it was okay for that film just because the characters, were played off well with him. Within Volume 2, you have kind of like that, like secretly sinister type of like God who wants to control the universe. And the way that the High Evolutionary is set up, I thought it was kind of going to be like the same deal, because it has some of like the similar ingredients from the past few films. Like, you have someone who wants to change society, they want to rule the world, they think they're doing so through objective means, but of course, they're emotionally driven with everything that they're doing. They want to change the world, they want to blow up planets, big intergalactic menace. We get all that with the High Evolutionary. But what sets them apart is that the Chuck Woody's performance here is amazing. Like, he has such a short temper that he immediately goes from like, like that collected intellectual who believes like he knows what's best for society. It's like, oh yes, I'm trying to make the world great. And then within like just like one scene, or just like whenever he enters a scene, he'll be a mess. Like, there's a great scene when he realizes that with his experiments with Rocket, that he's developed someone who's a bit of a genius, that he can't handle it, that when he enters the room, it's like he just got back from drinking. He comes in there and just explodes with anger and is just furious that this life form that he considers lower than himself was able to do something that he couldn't. And just watching his ego get damaged by all that, it's just beautiful. Like, the way that he explodes with rage, believing that, like, he's like some uh, like mad genius and just gets proven wrong again and again, which is the best type of villain. It's one of those people who, they believe that they're doing something better, like they're trying to create the perfect world, and of course they're not. And I love the fact that even the Guardians kind of realize that, like, about like midway through the film, like they listen to a little bit of his monologue. It's like, okay, we've been through this before. We know what type of guy you are. We know what you're trying to do, and we're gonna stop you. The same way that we stop every villain. And it's on that level, he works. His performance is just it blows you away every moment that he's on screen. There's a little bit of terror, not so much because like he shows like that he's capable of great like superpowers and violence, but just that he can like be short fused at the drop of a hat. Like if just one thing is wrong or out of line, like he'll snap immediately. And that's what I think makes him such a great villain. In addition to that, thematically, he works great because like he's positioned himself as this person who believes that he's going to fix all the problems within the galaxy. Like he believes that if I just get like the genetic coding right and perfect this planet the way that it is, it'll be perfect. Like his whole deal is like he set up basically a proto-Earth. Like he likes the idea of Earth and has made this planet like, I'm not sure if they give it an official title, but it's like it's basically called Counter Earth. And it's like saying, look, I'm going to take everything that Earth has and I'm going to make it better. And then when they get there, it's like it's not like it's mostly just like Earth, but because like he's done all these Island of Dr. Monroe experiments on all these different creatures, it's basically like Earth if it was inhabited by hybrid animals. And that's about, because like it has all the same problems. Like it's got suburban sprawl. It's got creatures in back alleys dealing drugs and beating each other up, and like it seems like there's like a homeless situation going in on the planet. So of course all the Guardians look at this and are like, "This is your idea of a perfect world?" And of course like the High Evolutionary is like, "Look, okay, let me take a mulligan. I'll do it better this time," because like his whole deal is like, if it's not working, I'll kill it and move on to something else. Which, of course, the Guardians have to combat and realize that, no, you don't have to, fix people who are a little bit broken. You just have to give them love and not just, kill them and start all over again. So thematically, it works really well here, especially with when you learn how dark Rocket's story is through all this, that it thematically plays out so perfectly that by the time there's a showdown between the High Evolutionary and Rocket, it's not just a matter of like who can shoot first or who has the best powers. It's a matter of like who's trying to like to make the greater argument against like, genocide basically. And it works really well for that type of film. So yeah, like I said, it has a lot of heart. There's a lot of somber moments. There's a very, very tender moment where you're worried that Rocket's not going to make it through here. That the scene of of Groot, once again voiced by Vin Diesel, cradling Rocket actually inspires tears within the audience. And it's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of like one of those like those Ren and Stimpy type of scenes where it's just like, I'm going to make you cry, but I'm going to make you cry at the stuff you would not expect to cry about. So you're going to be bawling at a scene where a tree is going to be hugging a raccoon, and it's actually going to hit you because you've spent enough time with these characters and you like them enough that you're invested in seeing where they're going here. And especially with how much they divulge about Rocket, you really do care for him. You're terrified that he's not going to make it out of this alive. As for Groot, he's just Groot. I mean, like, what more can, like, I mean, he provides like enough like decent heart. He has some cool action scenes. So pretty much everything that you get out of the past films. And I guess his biggest development is that he learns a few new words. So I guess that's progress. But that brings me to like the biggest fault of the film. And I guess when I say biggest, I mean like it's not a hindrance. Like it didn't take me out of the film. But I think the problem with this film is that throughout the Guardians of the Galaxy films, they've been building up so many characters that a lot of them kind of get pushed to the wayside where you don't get as much development with them. And that leads to like a few arcs that are simplified, which kind of work. In particular, I think it works with Kraglin, once again played by Sean Gunn, who's basically, if you don't remember Kraglin, he was basically the right-hand man of Yondu, and once Yondu kicked the bucket in Volume 2, Kraglin has basically taken over Yondu's mohawk and his special arrow that, if he whistles, it'll kind of like, zoom around and kill people. So Kraglin has kind of like taken on the duties as Yondu, as being like the protector of people and trying to kind of live up to that legacy. And there's a decent enough arc for him, despite the fact that it's kind of bookended with everything else that's going on within the film. But I think it works for him, especially when you have him playing off of the talking dog Cosmo, voiced by Maria Baklava. Maria Baklava. I always mispronounce her name. Which is cute. I mean, the extent of their arc is just that Kraglin thinks that Cosmo is a bad dog, and Cosmo wants to get, Kraglin to change his mind. And that's about all they have time for. But I think for as small as their time is on screen, it works for them. Like, it's cute. It's fun. It's adorable. It's a small enough hill for them to get over that you don't mind so much that it's bookended, because it works. I can't so much say the same thing for a new character who's introduced here, which is Adam Warlock. Now, if you might remember from Volume 2, which, my goodness, Volume 2 was like, what was that, like 2017? That was many years ago at this point. But you might remember at the end of Volume 2, they introduced Adam Warlock. Was going to be like this new being developed by the was that golden alien race? What are they called? The Sovereign. That's what they were. You might remember the golden people, the Sovereign, the people they ripped off at the beginning of Volume 2. They more or less play a little bit of a role here. And when I say a little bit of a role, it's mostly just like a supporting role. So like Adam Warlock is played by Will Porter, and there's a good premise behind Adam. Like, Adam's whole deal is he's supposed to be like this magnificent warrior. He can zoom through space. He doesn't need oxygen to survive out there. He can shoot energy rays. He's super powerful and all that. But he has like a childlike mind, and he has a little bit of like mommy issues where like he feels like he's being controlled by his mother, and he wants to set out on his own, and he doesn't feel like he's that well appreciative or utilized, especially for the fact that he's utilized by the High Evolutionary. He's just kind of like a backup. Like, he's not even like a secret weapon. He's just like, okay, you're here. I guess, like, if my plans go awry, like, I'll have you on standby, but other than that, I don't really have a use for you. And even the film doesn't have a use for you. Like, it feels like Adam really has to fight for his scenes, especially since a lot of his scenes, even though they set him up with pathos and wanting to prove himself and kind of like integrate himself into the Guardians, because he's like the perfect kind of oddball misfit to enter into this group, you don't spend that much time with him. That most of the time you're spending with him, it's through like all the VFX heavy scenes where he pretty much enters every scene by just smashing through a window. By just like, he never announces himself. It's just like someone tells him, oh, go retrieve these people or go attack these people, and he just does it. And they don't even like set it up. It's not like, Adam, go. It's just like, okay, it's this guy again. And it's like, okay, we'll deal with him. And I mean, like, to be fair, he does play a decent role in the finale, but you don't really spend that much time with him. To that same degree, I also don't think we get as much time with Peter in terms of like his goal. In terms of screen time, we get a lot of Peter, but Peter's always focused on his friends and the Guardians. That his bigger arc of trying to like come to terms with going back home and kind of like, revisiting his grandpa that he left behind, is almost kind of like inexplicable. It's kind of one of those things that's just like, it's in the back of his head, but it's not like present within the narrative. And I'm kind of like I'm kind of two minds of that, because like on one hand, yes, it's not as well developed where you feel like, it's something that's earned by the end, that it becomes part of the finale. But on another level, we also get to spend a lot more time with characters that we really haven't in the past few Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So it's a little bit of a trade-off, but ultimately, I was batting it around in my mind, but I think ultimately, it works for this type of film, because you do feel a lot more for Rocket and Drax and Nebula and Mantis than you did in previous Guardians films and even previous Avengers films. Like, obviously, more than the Avengers films because it didn't have time for them. But it feels like within Volume 3, especially since it runs well over 2 hours, you do have a lot more time to spend with these characters, and you do get to love them a bit more than just outside of just their like eccentricities, which like those are the easy things to fall back on. But given that this is a trilogy closer, you want to have, it feels like you want to learn more about them rather than just have them set off on another adventure and fight another villain the same way that they've done the same way before. So I guess that's the best thing to say about the film is that, it doesn't feel like the previous Guardians films. But I will say that the one thing that they have carried over from the other Guardians of the Galaxy movies is that is its style. Just like the way that the shots are set up and the colors that are used and the vibrancy and the tone is all so beautiful here. In particular, one of the most eye-popping scenes is where they have to infiltrate a corporate cybernetic organization that occupies the satellite made entirely of organic matter. So it's a good change of pace because here's this satellite that doesn't look, it's all just rocks and metal. Here it's all this weird fleshy material. And once they actually enter the interior, it's all these weird sterile whites and this gooey yellow stuff that they use for all their consoles. And they have these weird what look like golf balls for their communicators. And they have weird bulky chest armor that looks like, it looks like insects. It reminded me of those what are those Venture Brothers from the Venture Brothers. They had that whale themed villain who had was it krill or something like that? They had that weird armor. It kind of reminded me of that. I love everything about the look of that environment because it just it looks sterile and gross at the same time. And in addition to just looking good, especially I love the fact that when they have to infiltrate it, they have to enter from the outside with spacesuits, and all the spacesuits are they're all different colors. So it's immediately your eye is drawn to it. The satellite looks weird, and the spacesuits look like different colors, and it's just pleasing to the eye. It's just such, the whole sequence is just so beautiful. And even when we get to the counter Earth, which kind of feels like they'd fall back on, with simple Earth settings, they do still have some vibrancy and some absurdity to the city and suburban settings. I love once they get into the high evolutionary ship. It's got some bursts of color here and there and some lived in elements. I guess that's the best thing to say about Counter Earth is that it does feel like a lived in Earth as opposed to just this sterile and perfect, clean and prim and proper world. It feels like a typical suburbia, with the couches with blankets and the weird family pictures up on the wall and the lawnmowers and beer and all that. It's all perfectly set up. I love the way that Gunn establishes this world. And then of course, I doubt I have to bring it up at this point, but all the hallmarks are there that you'd expect from every James Gunn film. So you have what do you have here? You have Lloyd Kaufman making a cameo. You have Nathan Fillion making a cameo. Obviously, you have a little bit of a tentacle moment. There are some tentacle monsters that come into play, as per all of James Gunn's films. And of course, you have the jukebox soundtrack that is a little bit more updated this time around. And it actually and it works. It doesn't feel like it's just playing so much greatest hits here as much as it's trying to find music that works for certain scenes. And of course, if you wanted some great action, there's plenty of that here, including a sequence in a hallway that is just over the top, violent, and just wonderful, just beautifully staged, eccentric, violent, over the top, and fun. It's fun, and it has a lot of heart to it. I guess that's the best way to describe Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, is that it brings it all it brings closure to these characters. Like, it takes some interesting routes with them, and it doesn't leave them the same way that they did before, which is great. You don't just want to see these superheroes the same as they are, and fighting the same type of villains every single time. You want them to develop, you want to learn more about them, you want to love them, and you want to see them change over time, especially since, like, it's been 9 years since the first Guardians of the Galaxy film. You want to see something more than just the same old thing over and over again. And thankfully, James Gunn delivers a perfect, near perfect trilogy. Close, I guess, like, in terms of, like, the MCU rankings, like, this is definitely high up there. I don't know if I put it at the top, but just for, like, the sincerity and the heart and the willingness to go into darker places with this material that's always felt a little bit more fun with its misfit angles, for its sci-fi adventure. I actually really adored it, and it's not just that I adored this film. I think I adored just the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy as a whole, and that's mostly just because James Gunn has been at the helm this entire time, and has had so much control to, like, form these characters and make you care about them while still laughing at them at the same time. And given the inconsistencies that have been going on within the Marvel Cinematic Universes, even within, like, sagas where you do have returning directors, where it always feels like a little bit uneven with what they're trying to do, this has been one of the most consistent, and probably, I don't even have to say probably, it is the best trilogy of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So James Gunn has hit it out of the park with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I look forward to seeing all the stuff that he's doing with DC Comics right now. Like, he's leaving behind a perfect trilogy for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I greatly look forward to seeing what he does with DC Comics. So there you go. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, currently playing in theaters right now. Of course, if you are a big fan, you probably went to go see the midnight screening last night. So, but if you haven't, and you're thinking about going out to the theater, yeah, definitely go. I surprisingly loved a lot of Volume 3, and it made me appreciate the first the first volume even more, especially when you go back and you listen to, like, that brief passage that Rocket says about his history, which just kind of, like, comes out of nowhere. It's just like he gets angry, brings it up, just like, look, I didn't ask for this life. It hits different after you've seen this film. So yeah, one of the better MCU films. I know, like I was very torn on Quantumania, the Ant-Man movie this year, but I'm not with Guardians of the Galaxy. This is every bit the type of film that I wanted to see out of that saga. Oh, and I kind of threw my voice out when I did that review. So, I'm debating how I'm going to get through the rest of these. I'm just kidding. But I'll find a way. Let's see. Okay, let me get my notes up here for the next movie. I guess we'll talk about another comedy, even though it's not a good one, just to warn you. Let me see if I got let me get all the notes up here. Because I've been trying to get to the theater, but, it's just busy time. Okay, let's talk about Quasi. Can you tell I'm enthused? Talk about this film. All right, let me get my notes up here, and all right, let me get some more water here, because I know my voice is gonna get thrown out here. Okay, so 3, 2, 1. So Quasi is the latest film from the Broken Lizards comedy troupe, which tries to find funny stuff to do with the story of Quasimodo. Now, if you're familiar with Broken Lizards, they've done films like of course, like their first big film that a lot of people were interested in was Super Troopers, which I'll admit, Super Troopers was a film that I saw it when I was a teenager, and it was absolutely my jam. It was ridiculous, it was absurd. The actors perfectly fit their characters for just being this misfit ensemble of like highway patrolmen that were just inept at their jobs, and they fit really well into those roles. But then, like, Broken Lizards tried to like branch out and do other types of films. Like they did Club Dread, which was it was okay, but like I don't really feel like it went well for trying to like have fun with like the slasher saga. It feels like they had a decent idea, but they were trying too hard to like play up the jokes in it. Like, it's been a while since I've seen Club Dread, but I remember that it didn't get any better the more that I watched it. And they've done other films since then, like they've tried to do stuff like, was it like Beer Fest and stuff like that, but they never quite hit. To the point where it's like they did a sequel to Super Troopers a few years back. And I was actually surprised, like, how well it works. And I realized, like, oh, Super Troopers actually works for these actors. They fit the roles well. They know how to have fun with the material, and I guess it just helps to have like Brian Cox. Like, I mean, even with them, like Quasi, Brian Cox is back for a little bit. And I think it helps to have like Brian Cox there to like balance them out and be like a perfect counterbalance to their absurdities. Like, because like I didn't love Super Troopers 2, but there was just enough laughs in it where I felt like, okay, you know what, this is working for Broken Lizards. And then we get to Quasi, their latest film, and this doesn't work. It's just it feels like I commend them for the premise. They want to find funny stuff to do with the story of Quasimodo, so they staged like this absurd version of France, kind of similar to like History of the World Part 1 type of stuff, which I could be on board with. But I think like if you set up that material, I feel like you've got to have like some deeply funny stuff for it, because the way that this film comes across as, it just feels like they set up all this material. They built all these sets. They got all the costumes. They got the perfect makeup. They have the right setting, and they try to make it look like the era and everything like that. They try to get it as close to making it look as, to make it look like this, the era in which like, the story of the Hunchback of Notre Dame took place. And then, they're all dressed up. They got all this set up, and they kind of struggle for jokes here. Or at least that's the way it comes across. Like, I feel like if you were to set this all up, you would have to come into it with a script. But I feel like the script is relying a lot on improv here, because there are funny ideas for this type of story, but they're not played out to their full. I will say, though, like, I feel like the actors do okay for their roles here. Like, you have Steve Lem playing Quasimodo, who is kind of like, an interesting like a choice for this type. The way that he plays it up is like he plays Quasimodo as kind of this guy who's kind of like, like almost, I don't quite want to say like Sling Blade, but kind of one of those guys who just like, he realizes that he's he looks different, he looks ugly, and that he's not going to have the best luck, and just kind of like rolls with the punches. It's kind of like hey, this is my life, but hey, I got a decent job working like torture racks, and I hang out with people after work and have some beers, whatever. They establish him as kind of like almost kind of like an average Joe, which is kind of adorable. Like I actually kind of like the way that they set up his character here. He's actually kind of charming and fun, and I think that works for setting up this type of story where you're meant to feel bad for Quasimodo and you want to see him succeed here. The other actors, I feel, kind of play up their roles a little bit too much. Like, in particular, you have Kevin Heffernan playing Duchamp, being Quasimodo's kind of like optimistic hutmate who's like deeply jealous. And you might remember Kevin, if I remember correctly, he played Farva, the very obnoxious highway patrolmen, they're kind of like the standout character who's just like one of those guys who just like he wants to be the center of attention, and he has like a short fuse and he wants to dominate conversations, but he's a bit of a loser and he never quite fits in. It's more or less like Kevin is more or less playing like the same type of character here. And for a few scenes it works, but after a while just kind of like, okay, this guy's kind of doing the same thing. And it's like he works okay for the story in which he's jealous of Quasimodo and tries to sabotage him and his plans to because the whole premise here is that Quasimodo's got a chance to meet the Pope. And Duchamp basically wants to, he's angry at Quasi for getting this and wants to try to find a way to, to basically just, like push him out of the picture and say like, well, I did a lot of stuff. I'm better than Quasi. I should get to meet the Pope. And so they stage a weird, kind of plan to, portray Quasimodo as dead and fake his death. And then, of course, Duchamp gets a little jealous, and then everything kind of like snowballs and gets out of control here. But then like those two actors I feel like are the best here, and everyone else is kind of struggling to find jokes here. Like you have Jave Chandrasekhar playing the King of France, who is just referred to as King Guy. And it feels like his whole deal is like he's one of those like kind of short fuse kings who you're never quite sure when he's joking, but he wants to joke all the time. And that if you get on his wrong side, he's just going to kill you. So there's this kind of like weird edge to him. And I feel like a lot of that was, it definitely feels like a lot of the script was relying on improv, where they're just expecting like, okay, here's the premise. We'll just throw it out there. We'll get the costumes all set up and everything. And then the actors will just kind of find the funny stuff that happens on set. And that's a huge gamble for this type of story. And it's, oh my, it tries. I will say this. I'll give Broken Lizards points for trying. They really try to find the funny stuff here, but oh my goodness, they do not land. They needed rewrites, or they needed to like try out a few different scenes to see what worked here, because so many of the scenes just fall flat on their face. You're just kind of like, okay, these are funny ideas, but they're not taking off. They're not finding the funny stuff, and it feels like everyone's kind of struggling with their roles here, especially with with the King of France, and then you have the Pope, played by Paul Soter, who again, he feels like he's in the same camp. Like the Pope and the King are both at odds with each other, but it more or less feels like they're playing the same types of characters, where they're a little bit out of character. They swear here and there. They say some weird stuff. They try to one up each other, like they're having like a dick measuring contest the entire time. To the point where it's like I doubt. It wouldn't surprise me if like an early draft of this film was just the two of them having a dick measuring contest. Just because I feel like that's very much in line for Broken Lizards type of humor. And honestly, the more I think about it, I kind of wish it would have gone more of that raunchy route, because like, given the work they've done with like Super Troopers, they can go raunchy and they can actually make you laugh at like really gross and despicable stuff here. And it never quite hits that height in this film. Like, you can tell it's trying, like, it's trying to, like, claw its way up from this premise and this material and, having, like, this historical fiction and trying to, like, poke fun at it. And, like I said, like, with, like, a History of the World Part 1 type of vibe. But it never quite reaches that height. Yeah, in particular, like, especially, like, because, like, they want to make the worst type of jokes that... And the thing is, I don't think that these jokes are terrible in and of themselves, but I feel like you have to sell them well, is the jokes of trying to, like, make modern references. Because, like I said, like, History of the World Part 1 kind of had a little bit of that here and there, where it was like Pokemon's like, oh, here's stuff in our current culture that, would be funny if it was back in, these historical times. And the film tries this, like, at one point, like, Quasimodo, he's infatuated with Queen Catherine, played by Andriane Palicki, who, oh my, she's wasted here. Like, they do make her charming and a good love interest, but she barely has anything funny to do here. And it's mostly because the funniest scene she has is between Quasimodo, where Quasi has gone into exile, and he starts like painting pictures of himself, and Catherine is basically looking at this like oh well, what are you what are you painting here? It's like, oh, it's a selfie. And it's like it's a little vain, and you got to do it a few times, but it's very fulfilling. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. It's a joke about selfies. Okay, that's a decent throwaway joke, but they linger on it for way too long. Like at one point, like Queen Catherine also makes a selfie of herself. She's like, oh yeah, it's very fulfilling, and I had to do it. We get it. We get the joke. It's a selfie, and they're referencing it in the times of like medieval France, but you need to find something more with this. And you could, like I said, this film struggles so hard for jokes. And I got the feeling early on that was going to happen, especially when you have, like, Brian Cox plays the narrator here. And by narrator, I mean, like, he mostly just bookends the film. Like, he opens the film by saying, like, here's the story of Quasimodo, but we're going to tell you how much France sucked and how, like, they did really horrible shit to you and all that. And, like, it's kind of funny, to hear Brian Cox saying all this type of stuff. Some people might know Brian Cox from stuff like Succession and all that. It was kind of funny, like, and I was kind of laughing, but I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of like almost like nervous laughing. I was doing that, but it's like, oh no, is this going to be the whole film where they're just, they're trying to like throw cuss words and like, pop culture humor in here and there to try to like find funny stuff to do with this material. And it is. So it's like, it feels like, for anyone else reviewing this type of film, like, like the very, like, overreactive type of critics, I feel like they would be very, very, very angry with this film in the way that they would be with, like, Meet the Spartans, like, or Disaster Movie, which is like films that want to poke fun at a particular like genre or type of film and don't really have all that much funny stuff to say outside of like jokes that you could hear high schoolers making or like find on like Reddit forums and all that. And yeah, and like to a degree, like some of that is within Quasi, but I think I'm not as angry at the film. It's like, it's gonna sound weird to say this, but it's like, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed. Because, like, I know Broken Lizards can do funny stuff. Like, I have laughed at Super Troopers. And I have laughed at parts of Super Troopers 2. So, like, I know this comedy troupe is capable. They've made me laugh before. But it feels like anytime they veer outside of Super Troopers, they try to do other stuff, which I kind of commend them for, because, like, I can understand they don't want to just be Super Troopers the whole time, because, like, that feels like the most notable thing they've done, unfortunately. But it's weird, because I don't think this works for them. Like, they've tried slasher films, they tried, like, the, like, the Beer Fest stuff, they've tried the story of Quasimodo, and it's just not working for them. I don't know whether it's just because, like, they don't gel with the material, or they don't quite fit into the roles, or they just need a second draft to make this stuff work. But it just doesn't land here. So like, and because, like, I kept thinking of, like, Super Troopers, and, like, how there were bits and pieces here that reminded me of, like, other characters they've done, that kind of made me smile here and there. Like, I'm not furious with the film, because, like, I know the Broken Lizards can do better. And I hope they can. Like, I'm like, for as much as I despise this film, like, I really don't like it. I never laughed once at it. I maybe smiled here and there. It's like, okay, there's a little bit of funny stuff here. You got Brian Cox to say funny stuff, but ultimately it just didn't land. And I didn't like the film, but I'm kind of hopeful to see what Broken Lizards does next, because if anything, I'm glad that they're at least trying stuff new. And even though that Quasimodo doesn't work and it falls flat on its face, definitely harder, I think, probably than like Beer Fest or Club Dread, but yeah, like I said, this film didn't work. I did not like it. I don't condemn Broken Lizards, because I think they can be funny, and I think they can do funny stuff, but this is not one of their best films. And in fact, this maybe one of their worst films, just for how much it falls flat on its face and doesn't find that much funny material, to extract from this story. Like I said, it gets all dressed up in all this historical garb, sets up the tone and the setting and the all the like the makeup and everything. It looks accurate to the era, and then just can't find the jokes. So yeah, I did not enjoy Quasi, but hey, if you want to give it a shot, it's up to you. It's playing on Hulu right now, so feel free to go watch it. And you can see, they're trying. I give them points for trying. They are at least trying to inhabit some characters. It's just none of the jokes landed. I think I really do think that if they had like a second draft, you got someone to punch up the jokes, that film actually could work. Because I mean, like stylistically wise, I like the setting and everything. Hey, Hannibal Grimm, how's it going? Okay, so we talked about Quasi. Let's talk about Judy Blume Forever. Now we're really changing gears here. We went from a sci-fi adventure to a historical comedy to a documentary. But that's just how I roll. I cover everything. No film is off limits. I'm not one of those those YouTube critics who just like they only review like Marvel films and like the big blockbusters. Yeah. Oh, good. Glad you're doing good, Hannibal Grimm. Hope you're having a great spring. Okay, these last two films I don't have too much to say on, so I'm not sure if I'm going to count these as like reviews that I'm going to put up on the channel. But we'll see. I'll play it by ear, just because I don't have too much to say on these films. Not that they're bad films. Quite the opposite, actually. But we'll see how much I get through with these. Okay, let's get ready. And 3, 2, 1. So, Judy Blume Forever is the documentary on the legacy of the controversial author Judy Blume. And it's very poignant to have this type of film now, in the era of where like they're banning books and stuff like that, to talk about one of the more controversial authors who became like a bit of like a like one of those authors you gravitate towards and like you can identify with more. And it's mostly because like Judy Blume has written just a ton of different types of books. She's written like very a lot of stuff that kids can identify with, like with like Super Fudge and stuff like that, but books that I've read when I was a kid and like kids continue to read to this day, in addition to more like adult books that primarily just weren't afraid of like the female body and just and sexuality. As this documentary makes very clear, like Judy Blume was very upfront about talking about like your body and sexuality and masturbation, and just being very upfront about it, and being very, very open, and and of course for how old Judy Blume is, and when she released a lot of like more controversial books like Wifey and stuff like that, they it was shocking for the era, and it's probably for a lot of people now too. It's still pretty shocking. I imagine it's probably going to be shocking for a lot of people who probably only know about Judy Blume through like the Fudge books that they read when they were kids. Or like of course like this film is properly timed to come out with Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is a great coming of age type of film, so perfectly positioned as like a supplemental material, where it's like when you get done watching that film, come watch this documentary on Judy Blume's entire legacy, and you'll see just everything that went into this author and how she composed her stories. So within the documentary, we get to hear Judy Blume in her own words describe her history. She talks about her life growing up, what inspired her to write certain books, and what's reflected in the material, her relationship with her husband and her children, and how all of that played a role in trying to make these groundbreaking books that have become so greatly revered over time. And it becomes very very obvious, I think, when you hear like her words about like what's reflected in her work. Like at one point she talks about like the abrupt death of her father, which impacted her in a heavy way and inspired her to write a book about that dealt with death in a very honest and emotional way. And then just like how she dealt with her kids and finding stuff that that kids would connect with. And I love how like we don't just get like interviews with Judy, we also get like archival footage of her in interviews when she was much younger, and how she brings up like the idea that yes, I'm very much in tune with my childhood, which allowed me to write stuff that kids can relate to. And it feels I almost feel like it's a little bit like a dated concept where like writers tap into like the idea that writers would not be able to tap into like kids would be into and write books for children. Only because like when I watch like the archival interviews within this film, a lot of the interviews were like really, you can recall your childhood? It's like yeah, I can remember bits and pieces of like the 4th and 5th grade and how I felt then and the types of emotions that were swirling in my head, and convey them to that type of audience. Which is great. Like they reveal stuff like within stuff like Tales of a 4th Grade Nothing, which I actually do remember reading that book, and it's fascinating just to see like all the stuff in her life that cropped up to form these stories, and stories that I think. That stories that did affect Judy Blume's life in a very meaningful way. Like there are a few scenes in this film where Judy Blume will actually read passages from her books and recall where she was when she was writing this type of material and how it affected her. And she breaks down. Like at one point she's just like she's breaking into tears while she's reading a particular passage. And she's just like, oh, I can't do this. I know I said I'm going to do this. I am going to do this, but it's hard to get through this. So it's one of those things. It's like it's earnest, it's honest, and she wants it to be conveyed, but like but it's painful, and she's very open about that painfulness, and that's what attracted so many people to it. Now, of course, for being this type of documentary, you are going to get a few fans who celebrity fans who come out and talk about her. So people like Lena Dunham and Anna Conkle and Molly Ringwald and Samantha Bee all come out and say like, yes, like I read Judy Blume growing up and I remember her books, and like and even if you stick around in like the post credits, there are scenes of them like going through like the classic books, like, oh, look at these covers, and, like all this cool stuff. And they have like some decent stuff to say on it. Like I kind of dug how like Molly Ringwald was kind of talking up these books, saying like oh, I had this haircut, and here's where I was when I was reading this book. So it was fun to hear her words, but I was actually more fascinated to hear the words of other authors. In particular, like there are some authors who have banned books who are covered in this documentary who speak openly about how much they loved Judy Blume and how much they were an inspiration to her to continue writing stuff that challenged social norms and wasn't afraid to be controversial. And that daring nature to Judy, I think, is what makes her so great and rebellious, and just like you love her all the much. Like by the end of the film, she brings up the fact that like she can't help but bring up like her age, like she's well past her 70s and all that. She keeps bringing it up, and she's like, well, like I don't feel like it. I feel like I'm the same. Like I feel like I'm youthful and that I can still do a lot of stuff. But I also like the fact that she's also very open about wanting to experience more in life rather than just relying on the past and just like recollecting everything. Like at one point she brings up how like she wrote her final novel and she wrote it not so much as just like like she was like she was out of ideas, or she was like, she wanted to close this chapter. It was more like, it was the way that she describes it is just like, she wanted to have different experiences and like opened up a new chapter in her life, more or less, like, however you want to phrase it. But it's interesting to see the way that she progressed from that point and kind of like moved on from writing, even though like the way that she acts and the way that she talks, you feel like there's more stuff that she could be writing, but it's her life, and that's the way that she wants to live it, and the way and after everything that she's gone through and how influential she's been and what she's written, you feel like she deserves a break. She's like, so if she's like, hey, I'm done with writing I'm done with writing maybe forever. You're just kind of like, you know what? You've written so many cool stuff and you've inspired so many people. Sure. You've earned this. And by the end of the film, after hearing everything that she's gone through and how many people she's affected, yeah, she has earned it. So yeah, I mean, the way that I feel like the documentary is diced up well enough where like it doesn't harp too much on one area. It doesn't focus on too many talking heads who are just all gushing about Judy Blume, which it could have been. And the archival footage alone is worth watching just for that, just to get an idea of the era. Especially, oh my goodness, my favorite part of the film is when she goes on television and debates Pat Buchanan, who keeps like bringing up like sexuality and masturbation, and Judy Blume is just like, man, you were really hung up on this. What's your problem? Just and wonderful, and just like getting Judy's commentary on that, which is like, I had no idea who Pat Buchanan was, which is like, he was weird. So just getting her perspective on just her legacy and how she wrote her books, just on those merits alone, it's a fascinating documentary, and it kind of makes me want to go back and read the Fudge books. So yeah. That's Judy Blume Forever. It's currently playing on Prime Video. It had a limited theatrical debut, I think. But that was like, I think it was like 2 weeks ago, so it's probably not playing. You can watch it on Prime Video though. Did I review Sisu yet? No, Sisu I missed. Because like I said, it's April. April was busy as hell. There were too many good. I didn't get around to see like Evil Dead Rise or Chevalier. So many. I got so much to catch up on from April. April was chaotic. Like April was like, it's as busy as October or well, yeah, I guess. Yeah, October is pretty busy. It's as busy as like October or August is. Like usually those times are when it's like it's chaotic. And it's just like I can't keep up with it, But yeah, like I definitely want to see Sisu. I'm looking forward to the trailer. I love the way they set up the trailer. Where they're like, don't worry, we're not gonna kill the dog. We still have it in the I know. It's still playing at theaters. I do want to get around to seeing Sisu, though. It definitely, like, from what I've seen from the trailers, it's my kind of jam. So, like I said, a lot to catch up on. Okay, so with that being said, let's get to the final film that we're going to review. And yeah, like yeah, the trailer is amazing. Like, it feels like a lot more people have been talking about the trailer, and I think it's just because like they did like credit to the marketing team on Sisu, they knew how to appeal to their audience with the whole people were tweeting like, oh, this film looks cool, but you had a dog in it, and the Nazis bring up how they want to kill the dog. That dog better not die. I'm telling you, that dog better not die. And like they kept posting, they had that trailer where they posted all the reactions like, don't kill the dog, don't kill the dog, don't kill the dog. And then they put in the trailer, don't worry, the dog's fine. The dog's safe, the dog doesn't die. It's post John Wick rules. They apply. Which, beautiful marketing. It is everything. I figure too. Like the people behind it are great. I trust them with this type of material. So yeah. Even if it wasn't that great, I love the whole idea, the premise, and the tone. So obviously, I'd want to check it out. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, you doing? All right. So let's talk about our final film of the night. A smaller film, but hey, that's usually why I do these reviews and stuff like that. Is I want to highlight films that people might not have seen, because obviously everyone has seen trailers for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Everyone knows what that film is. Not as many people know about Kids vs. Aliens. So, let's talk about that. Let me get my notes up here. Okay. Here we go. All right. And here we are. In 3, 2, 1. So, Kids vs. Aliens is a horror. I guess like it mixes like horror and like sci-fi elements and a little bit of like like retro comedy with like it's you can definitely tell it's drawing from like the 80s for its style here, which of course is kind of the like the vintage style du jour of a lot of horror films these days, as they want to embrace the 80s. But I think I like Kids vs. Aliens a lot more because like it embraces more of the tone of those like 80s horror films rather than just like the whole 80s aesthetic. Like there's never a moment like, I mean, this film definitely could have taken place in the 1980s, but it doesn't. Like it definitely inhabits these modern sensibilities that I feel like it actually kind of works here. So this film, it's directed by Jason Eisner, I believe I'm pronouncing his name correctly, and it's a spin-off actually of one of the entries in the what's it? The VHS anthology. You might remember within the VHS anthology, there was an entry in which aliens came to a house full of kids, like their parents are gone, like they're having a fun time, they're goofing off with like their sleeping bags, and then aliens come, they invade their house, and they storm in, they drag them out and abduct them into like their UFO. It's a simple and decently terrifying short for the whole deal with like VHS is that it's all from like the perspective of like the camera and whoever's filming it. So it was a decent short. It's definitely not my favorite of the VHS franchise, and it's mostly just because there's not a lot to it. It's just a bunch of kids hanging out, and then they get abducted by aliens. So I feel like this was actually a good opportunity to expand on that, like, because Kids vs. Aliens takes that same premise. The same stuff happens in it, but it expands a little bit more on the characters. And the biggest thing about it is that it has fun with the material. So the whole premise is that it's a bunch of kids who are obsessed with filming these weird kind of like sci-fi. It's weird. They're kind of like a cross between like a sci-fi action film and like wrestling. and wrestling type stuff. It's weird. Like they transition from like having these like like kind of like Be Kind Rewind sweeted type of like action scenes that are kind of cute in their assembly. Like they're definitely like young filmmakers in the making, and then transition to like having knockdown drag out fights in like a wrestling ring that they have for some reason. Which is kind of adorable. I kind of like the way that they set the film up that way. It's odd, but it's definitely not something I expected to see out of this type of film. So you have a whole bunch of like these quirky little boys trying to film this film, and they have like they have a teenage girl called Sam who's trying to help them out with their film, but she's getting a little older and feels like I don't want to hang out with kids this whole time. I mean, it's cool that they're making these films and they're fun, but I want to do other stuff. I'm interested in boys. And she takes an interest in the local bully. Like, there's this dude who's basically like, like your stereotypical 80s, teenage bully who picks on the little kids and harasses them like violently at many points. And she's kind of like, oh, well, he's older. he's kind of cute. I could kind of dig him. And then the more that she digs on him, the more that he kind of like becomes, a terrible person. And I guess the one thing I kind of dig about this film, and I feel like some people are going to be frustrated with this, is that it focuses on establishing these characters and making you understand them and kind of have fun with kind of like a little bit like the 80s material. Like I said, 80s vibe. And I think I got to stress that point here, is that the comedy in this film is a bit more tongue-in-cheek. Like, it rarely feels like they're trying for a joke here. It feels like they're just trying to embrace the absurdity of it here and there and kind of add in lines that are ridiculous, but the characters believe in them. Like, there's never a moment where, like, they turn to the camera and it's like, hey, remember this 80s cliche? Isn't this funny? Isn't this funny? No, it doesn't have to do that because it recognizes the vibe. It realizes what made those types of films from the video nasty era so ridiculous, and weaves it beautifully into this film that can use like drones and like video cameras and like, all this modern technology and make it work for that. Because like the aliens don't show up until like much, much later in the film. I would almost say maybe like the third act. But the moment they arrive is perfect timing. Because like a party gets out of hand, it's get wild and crazy, and then the aliens come in and they just terrorize this party. They abduct people, they bring them up onto their ship, they melt human skin off, and like great gory moments where like the guts are all falling out, and like people whose skin it's half melted off, and like their skulls are screaming. They put this weird goo on people that transforms them into what looks like I'm not even sure what it basically transforms into monsters. They have like weird skin and claws and teeth that they want to rip each other's flesh off. Just like great stage lighting. It's weird. It's bizarre. You don't quite understand what these aliens are trying to do outside of just, make this situation more chaotic and violent and weird. And it embraces that. Like at one point, like I doubt if I gave the context for this would make any sense, but at one point, Sam is swinging around a sword trying to kill these aliens. And it's just like, there's not a whole lot explained with the sword. Like, there's, in context, it kind of makes sense within the film, but it doesn't have to. I mean, it's a woman swinging swords at aliens, chopping them up, who are trying to, like, melt people's skin off and transform them into monsters. And the film realizes that this is a bit ridiculous, but it's also trying to be very earnest with the material. Like I said, when they have the gore effects, they don't skimp on the material here. Like, they actually look really good. Like, the scene where, like, the flesh is melting off and it's basically just, like, a skeleton screaming with, like, meat on its skull. It's believable. And it's terrifying. And it's just, like and they're trying to replace, like, the absurdity here because, like, the central bully is just kind of, like pushing me, like, no, not me. Just, like, here, take my friends. Take my cohorts, like, melt their skin off. And I'm just like, dude, you're a dick. So, of course, like, they build up his death to be, like, a big, like, like, comeuppance, like, where, like, the karma's going to come down on him hard. And the payoff is beautiful. It's a big, bloody, violent payoff, and it works so well. I almost kind of feel like some people are probably going to hate the ending of this film because it kind of has this kind of, like, weird off-kilter ending that almost kind of comes out of nowhere. But then again, so much else that happens in this film also comes out of nowhere, where it's just weird and unpredictable. So, like, it's one of those films where just for the vibe of it, I actually kind of love it. Like, it's not... I don't feel like it's the best that you could do with this material, but for everything that's set up, especially for like the staging and the shots and the colors and the creativity with like the lighting and the special effects and the gore, a lot of love and craft went into that. And also just there's decent writing here where like the dialogue for these foul-mouthed kids is believable enough, but also charming enough where you kind of care what happens to them. Like it definitely has like that kind of like Stranger Things vibe without trying to be Stranger Things, where it's like these characters remind you so much of yourself when you were that age, but they're not trying so hard to recapture the 80s. Because let's face it, we have so many horror films nowadays that are just trying to recapture the 80s. And here's a film that's trying to go for that aesthetic, but not trying to be a 1980s horror film. It's like, it's 1988 and here's the era, and everyone has like, bad hair and bad clothing. And here's a film that's just like, it recognizes what made those types of ridiculous films fun and gross, and just weaves it in within like a bit more of like a bit more of a modern story. But that being said, it has fun with it. That's ultimately what matters with it. It has fun with this material, especially for a very ridiculous, gross scene where they try to humiliate the bully by revealing that he's apparently into like he has like a piss fetish, which results in a very gross and absurd scene that actually kind of made me laugh. It did catch me off guard here. Kids vs. Aliens, it takes a small segment of like the VHS horror franchise and expands it enough to like it's not a very long film. It's fairly short. I believe it runs like under 90 minutes. But it has, like I said, it has fun with the material, and it has some great gore effects, and yeah, I dig the vibe of this film. So Kids vs. Aliens is currently playing on Shudder. Yes, actually, I was debating it in my head, but yes, it is in the second VHS film. I should have known that too, because like the second VHS film, that's probably my favorite VHS entry. Like I started a few days ago, but I haven't finished VHS 99. So I feel like I might like that one a little bit more. But yeah, VHS 2 is definitely like top of the list there. I was thinking for a minute because like I think wait was it in the first VHS movie? But I remember like I didn't really like the first VHS movie that much. It's like no, it couldn't have been, because I remember it was a decent closer to the film, but like so many other entries within like VHS 2 are, oh my god, they're just so perfectly assembled. They're just so they take the concept and they run with it hard in that sequel. So yeah, I doubt I'm alone in saying VHS 2 is like the best entry in that saga. And I say that just because like I haven't seen VHS 99 yet. I'm in the middle of it. I've got through 2 segments, and the segments are okay. They're not bad. I'm actually kind of digging on it. I'm curious to see how it ends, but yeah. but that being said, like, for how uneven the VHS franchise is, like I felt the first film was lukewarm, and VHS Viral I feel is too messy for my liking. Like, I like bits and pieces of it, but as a horror anthology, I think like there's so much potential within it, and there's such a wide range of stuff you could do with that material that that I think it has boundless potential, that I look forward to every entry. If they reveal like, like there's like VHS 2000 comes out next year, it's like, hell yeah, I'm gonna watch that. I'll give it. I always love giving horror anthologies a shot. Honestly, I would at this point I would be down for like another ABCs of Death. Those ABCs of Death movies, like they're like, because like it's covering the whole alphabet. It's like 26 shorts and they're super 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 condensed. But some of them are actually pretty good. Like for like that scatter shot method of like how they assembled it, I was actually surprised by a lot of those entries. So, I mean, yeah, if like I said, if they announced another VHS horror film, I'd be up for it. And if they have announced another ABCs of Death, I am gonna be there day one for it. So, I guess that's just my love of horror anthologies in general. Just there's so much potential. It feels like you get to like watch like a little horror film festival with like the little short films. So what's not to love? What's not to love? Oh god, I love horror so much. God, I need to go see Evil Dead Rise. I'm gonna see it eventually. I'm gonna get around to it. All right. Oh my goodness. But yeah, thank you, Duma, for the subscription. I'm glad you stopped by. Because it actually, you bring up a good point, Duma. Like, Kids vs. Aliens is actually the script I actually liked. And I think it's because, like, the humor that they wrote into Kids vs. Aliens is strictly tongue-in-cheek. Like, at one point, when they got to get the parents out of the picture, they write kind of like the most ridiculous but also believable dialogue. Where they're just like, okay, we gotta leave. Watch your kid brother, because if we die, you gotta be responsible. Because that's not foreboding. But I love that they're very earnest about it, and it's not treated as like kind of like a wink nature. And it's one part the script that makes that work, and one part the direction as well. So yeah, credit to actually, yeah, let's give full credit here. Credit to Jason Eisner for the direction, but also his two writers. Eisner also wrote. What am I saying? But also like John Davies co-writing the film with him. They deserve credit. I look forward to seeing what they do next. Come to think of it, do they have anything new on the horizon? Got anything new? Not seen anything yet. Because I know like they did like Hobo with a Shotgun, which it's been years since I've seen that film, but I mean it's a Rutger Hauer Grindhouse film. I mean, by default, I knew I was gonna love that film. It's been years since I've seen it. In fact, I think I actually have it somewhere in my mess of DVDs, but yeah, I remember loving it at the time. Also because it's Rutger Hauer having a lot of fun and a ridiculous horror film, so yeah. I'm not seeing anything for Eisner on the horizon. But you know, with Shudder, there's lots of possibilities. So yeah. I look forward to seeing what he does next. Hey, you know what he should do? ABCs of Death. I'm down. All right. So let's do a quick recap here before we jettison off here. Oh, it's a little bit loud here. Okay. All right. So, what do we review today? We reviewed Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It is a solid trilogy closer for the Marvel Misfit Ensemble of the Galaxy. Has a lot of fun with the material and explores more of the characters that were not as explored before. It's not as funny as the other entries, but it has a lot more heart, a lot more charm, and it's just an overall fun film. Also, you will cry at the plight of a raccoon in a tree. If you did it in the previous entries, you probably will with this one. So, great film, currently playing in theaters. We also reviewed Quasi, the Broken Lizard's historical comedy. It's trying to be History of the World Part 1, and it doesn't quite reach that range. It's a big disappointment from the Broken Lizards people. It's currently playing on Hulu. Watch it at your own risk. We also reviewed Judy Blume Forever, the documentary about the controversial author of stuff like Wifey and Super Fudge, covering everything from kids films to everything from kids books to adult books. Very fascinating documentary, and it's a great supplemental with the recently released Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, which is based on the book she wrote. So if you really love that film, and if you've never read the book, I'd say probably read the book, but, you know, also come back for this documentary as well. And we also reviewed Kids vs. Aliens, a fun, gory romp with a very tongue-in-cheek humor for this horror, supernatural comedy that has fun with the material, and it's just wonderfully gory and tongue-in-cheek, and doesn't come off as trying too hard for trying to find the weirdness and the comedy within this horror setting. Greatly expands on an entry from VHS 2. It's currently playing on the streaming service Shudder. Go check it out. You will not be disappointed. Well, unless you don't like horror films and aliens. If you don't, I can't help you. Okay? I can't. If you want stuff more grounded in reality, go watch Judy Blume Forever. Okay? Yeah. So there we go. So, what do we got coming up in the next few weeks? Well, in 2 weeks, I'll be back for another stream. And what are we going to have then? I believe, let me double check the calendar here, but I believe we will be reviewing the new Fast and the Furious film, because it wouldn't be summer. It wouldn't be a summer without another Fast and the Furious film. So That's on the horizon. Let me double check to make sure we will be able to review that in time. Let's see. Yeah, actually, by the next stream, we will have seen Fast X, the 10th Fast and the Furious film. And we will also review the new A24 film, which is coming out next week. I believe... Oh, no, wait. Actually, I don't think it's coming out. I think it's coming out 2 weeks from now. But I am seeing it next week. There's a new A24 film called You Hurt My Feelings, starring Juliette Louis-Dreyfus. I always screw up her name for some reason. But yeah, I don't know as much about this film. I've read the press release, but I'm going to be seeing that film. I kind of like to come into films a little bit blind, see how they are. So we'll be reviewing that film. I'll try to see if I can get around to 2 other films that I want to get around to covering. Is oh god, what was it? Crater. And what's the... Oh yes, the new White Man Can't Jump. So those I do have screeners set up for. It's just like I'm trying to time them out properly. So so yeah, you can look forward to 4 new films the next time that we hop on for streaming within 2 weeks. So expect within 2 weeks we'll have reviews of Fast X, You Hurt My Feelings. You don't actually remember the name of the title. And then we'll also review Crater and White Man Can't Jump, the remake. So yeah, as long as I get 80s cartoon. I mean, it's the Fast and Furious films. What should we expect? Nothing less from those? I mean, heck, that's about all we expect from it. It's apparently going to be the second to last film in the Fast saga. Okay, so yeah, we'll do the little outro here. So if you want to read my written reviews, especially the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, a review of that is currently on movieswithmark.com. You can read all of my official Rotten Tomatoes approved reviews or over on filminquiry.com. I actually forgot to cover one film, but I'll briefly mention it here. There's a documentary I just covered on filminquiry.com. It's fairly new. Not many people have seen it. It's called Still Human. And it's about economic disenfranchisement within the homeless and orphans. And it looks at like this global problem. It's a very low budget documentary, but I'm recommending this film because it doesn't individualize the problem, and it doesn't just kind of like shrug its shoulders. It actually tries to address where these issues are coming from on a bigger level, and it focuses much more on this topic than I expect other documentaries to. So it's a low-budget documentary. I don't even think it has any Rotten Tomatoes reviews at this point, so it's very, very new. And when I say new, I mean like it's just getting more of a commercial release. Like I believe it's been to some festivals, but it's just coming on VOD now. So yeah, like I said, trying to address new films. And yes, in case you weren't aware, yes, there is a new White Man Can't Jump, because we live in an age of remakes. So I'm just saying, don't be surprised if I tell you like there is a remake of like Fatal Attraction or Dead Ringers, because I got some news for you. There actually are some remakes of Dead Ringers and Fatal Attraction. In fact, Dead Ringers is actually it's a gender swapped miniseries right now, if you can believe that. So if you can believe it, But hey, I do have a little bit of fondness for White Man Can't Jump, so I'm gonna come into it with a little bit of reservation, but I'm not hung up on it. I'm not gonna come into it like all these other people with like Little Mermaid was like a classic, and I don't know what they're gonna do with it. Like White Man Can't Jump, it's a good film. It's not a great film. Like I like parts of it here and there, and just like the performances make me keep coming back to it. But I'm not like I don't think you like this is sacred. You can't do anything with it, but But I'll see, And hey, sometimes remakes can be good, Plenty of that. I know a lot of people love that film. I like the film. I like White Man Can't Jump. To be fair, it's been a while. I think it's been like maybe like 10 years since I last watched it. But I remember I loved the performances. Like I still can't I still remember that scene where what was it the scene where like Woody makes the shot and just like and just like humiliates the guy. Like I remember like I love the acting in that scene, just like the natural nature of it, you know. My reservation with Little Mermaid looks like Nightmare Fuel. I mean, it doesn't look good. Like, I mean, I don't condemn the idea that if you want to do something new with the material, because I mean you can. I mean, like, you know, like we always do remakes of like every, you know, old text and all that stuff, you know. I mean, it's probably going to be about as bland as every other Disney live action remake. Like, honestly, like you know, like the way that I viewed every like Disney live action remake after Pete's Dragon has just kind of be like, okay, is this tolerable, or is just like not doing anything for me? Because that's what it's in. Because Dumbo did nothing for me. Like Aladdin, I tolerated. You know, like there's parts of it I kind of dug. Ditto for Lion King. Like it's not a great film, but there are like parts of it I kind of dig here and there. Not enough where I'm saying like, oh, you got to rush on view. It's like, okay, you know, for reworking the material, you found a little bit of interesting stuff to do with this. Not a lot, mind you, but yeah. Especially, yeah, the animal characters. I made this joke on Twitter, and I'm sure someone else has made this, but like, you know that scene from The Simpsons where Homer has a fondness for a lobster, and like the way that he looks at this lobster, like this very like cartoony, doe-eyed lobster that's kind of looking at him all like cutesy. I feel like that's 1989's Little Mermaid, and then he shows the lobster to Marge, like, look how cute it is, and it's like all bug-eyed and drooling and like hideous, and it's got like the claws out and snapping it. That's the updated version of the Little Mermaid. But I was if he happened at the sound mixes. I mean, yeah, that's about as much as you can hope for at this point. Like, I'm not expecting like the Little Mermaid to wow me. I think the most it can do is just be like a copy thing. Yeah, the Mr. Pinchy. Yeah, I've referenced it on Twitter. I'm sure other people have brought it up too. And in fact, the closer we get to that film, it's probably going to come up too. Oh my god. I'm probably going to end up reviewing it for a venue, so expect that review. I mean, I'll review it because like some venues are probably going to want me to cover it, but like But I'm not gonna go like into it's like, oh, woe is me. Why did I go see the Disney remake? It's like, cause the venue asked me to review it, and I'm gonna tolerate. I'll be honest. Like the way that it's set up, I'm probably not gonna dig it. It's probably just gonna be like lukewarm reprisals of the same song, and just like, you know, throwing in like twists that don't make sense, like with like Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio. So whatever. It's probably like, even if it's like decent, it's gonna be bland. It's probably gonna be bland. It's gonna be a huge shock to me if it's actually like surprisingly good, you know. But I doubt it is, and because like I'm tempering my expectations because it's gonna be bland, but it's definitely not gonna be the worst film of the year. I mean, I saw the Netflix film You People, which is like a tone-deaf version of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and Quasi just misfired so horribly that, like, my bar for like the terrible films this year is already like set, and I doubt that like Disney's gonna topple over it unless there's some like really egregious, weird twist in it. It's probably just gonna be bland. And like, I'll say it right off the bat, it definitely is not going to warrant the overreactions it's going to get. And it's going to get overreactions. People are going to hate watch it. That people are going to, make angry videos about how, like, this shouldn't have been changed. Like the Disney film, the animated film was fine, why'd they do the live action thing? Basically, a reiterance of the same scripts that they've done for, like, for like Cruella and Maleficent and Dumbo and Aladdin and Mulan and all the other ones, it's going to be the same complaints as before. The same stuff. So, Soap in the Machine. Yeah, actually. That being said, a lot of other films I'm looking forward to. I know like a lot of people are up in the air on Oppenheimer. I'm curious just to see what Nolan does with the material. I wasn't that big a fan of Tenet. I feel like Tenet misfires, but it's a competent piece in terms of like the way it's shot and the theatrics. So I'm curious about Oppenheimer, and of course the Barbie movie. The Barbie movie looks surreal and wonderfully absurd. Plus, we got Dune Part 2 coming out later this year. There's so much other good stuff to look forward to. I don't know why people want to like harp on just like stuff like The Little Mermaid. Like there's so much other good stuff coming out. Why wouldn't you want to talk about it? Like what's come out this year? John Wick Part 4 was brilliant. It's the best of the series by far, and the series was already like incredible before like Part 4, and Part 4 just knocked it out of the park. I love Dungeons and Dragons. That was a lot of fun. Suzume was another great coming of age anime fantasy by Makoto Shinkai. Brilliant stuff. Lots of great stuff this year. I just want to see him Nolan out of the sound. That'll be interesting to see, especially in a film that involves an atomic bomb going off, to see if he actually gets the sound right. Yeah, that'll be curious. Yeah, because like there's a problem with the sound in Tenet, especially since like the characters have like gas masks on and all that, so you can barely hear them. Let's see what I say. I'm curious to see what Gerwig and Baumbach will do with Barbie. Yeah, also just looking at like the talent assembled for the Barbie movie, you've got to be curious. You've got to want to see it. Like, okay, you have Greta Gerwig directing, you have Noah Baumbach doing the screenplay, and you have Margot Robbie, you have you have Ryan Gosling, you have this all-star cast, and they're playing up like the aspects of like the Barbie toys and all that. How could you not want to watch that, you know? D&D, Tetris, and Mario had me stupid happy. Yeah. I think, wasn't Tetris was Tetris a miniseries or was it a movie? I have heard good things about Tetris though. And even like I wasn't as big on the Mario movie. Like it did nothing for me. I thought it was way too safe and had all the same problems as every other Illumination film. But that being said, you know, a lot of people seem to love it, and if that makes you happy, it makes you happy, you know. Don't let my deterrent into, and I feel like I don't have to say that. Like obviously, if you love the Mario movie, you love it. Enjoy it because you enjoy it. You know, a lot of people feel like they have to justify their feelings for it because of like the critic score and all that, and it's like you don't. You really don't. If you love the film, you love the film. One of my favorite films from last year was Babylon, and that has roughly the same score on Rotten Tomatoes as the Mario movie. So, you know, love what you love. Also, understand how review aggregates work, because a lot of people get way too defensive about that, to the point where it's like Mario's their personality. It's like, no, it's fine if you like the film, you know? Mario film was what it needed to be. And I'm sure, like, for Mario fans, I think I preference my review by saying that if you're a Mario fan, you're just kind of looking for, you know, just to tick a few boxes, it will probably do that. And on that level, probably a lot of Mario fans are going to be appeased with it. They definitely are. But, like, the other thing, like, not to dog on it, but just, like, the one thing I wanted to stress is that, in terms of, like, adapting material for fans, a good film will give the fans what they want, which is what I feel like what the Mario film did. But a great film will give the fans something they never knew they wanted. And that's actually why I love the Dungeons and Dragons film a lot more, just because, like, you know, like, Dungeons and Dragons fans probably didn't know they wanted a kind of like a Guardians of the Galaxy style quirky caper for that type of film, for that type of franchise, and it works. It works surprisingly well. sometimes they watch Babylon in full, all they know is that you never follow Toby into a dark hole. Yeah, Babylon has so many bizarre and surreal sections, and it's just... It's a surreal, weird film, and I absolutely love it. It also, like, seriously, if you haven't seen it, watch it till the end. You will not believe how that film ends. Like, I could tell you right now what happens within, like, the last few minutes of the film, and you probably wouldn't believe me. Especially with everything else that happened that far, you probably wouldn't believe me what happens at the end. So I won't spoil it for you. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, Hannibal. I'll close out the stream here. Just kind of been going on for a while here. So be sure to subscribe if you want to see more movie reviews, as well as video essays and all the other fun stuff that I do here on the channel. Read all my stuff over at movieswithmark.com, filmandkorea.com, TritzyGeek.com. Also, if you want to support the stream and you want to, and you'd like some books for your shelves, in addition to all your DVDs, whatever, you can support my Patreon, in which I have some books for sale there. I'm also writing a new book on Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm uploading chapters to there as I finish them. So you can support me through there, and you can also get those books once they release, which I'm giving out to patrons who are subscribed. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, and I'll check back in 2 weeks and we'll review another Fast and the Furious film, another A24 film, some more remakes, and who knows what else. I'll find some other crazy crap to review. So until next time, see you later.